Hey guys, my name is Eric, also known as Biggie Nose, and I've been playing competitive Overwatch on PC since the game's release. Today I wanted to make a video discussing the state of matchmaking and more specifically the poor state of matchmaking in competitive Overwatch. The reason I want to make this video is that I love Overwatch. I think it's one of the best games that has been competitively made, and the amount of polish and time and effort spent in the game deserves way more people playing it. And I think one of the big reasons people aren't playing it as much is the state of competitive. Now I'm just going to go through this video is going to be unscripted. I'm just going to hit all my points, and I'm just going to talk about my opinions and my experiences and some of the things that I think should be changed in regards to the matchmaking system for Overwatch. One of the first things I wanted to talk about is how the game design is actually affecting competitive queue, and how poor game design decisions can also lead to poor competitive experiences. One of the first things I want to mention is that the design schedule should match your competitive seasons. Now, I'm kind of pulling this from a lot of the stuff I'll talk about. I'll pull from League of Legends, but when I say this, I mean the major changes in League of Legends are done at the end of the season. The seasons are typically, the year long, and there's a few months of off season for the major changes to the game to let players the time to adjust to those changes. Now, Blizzard's development path for creating new heroes is different than League of Legends, being between 4 and 6 months for a new hero to be released. What that means is that those competitive seasons should match the amount of time that Blizzard's scheduling development should follow. So if I'm Blizzard and I'm going to release a hero every 5 months, my competitive season should be at least 5 months. And adding an off season, which it would be, let's say, a month, it would allow me to incorporate my changes and allow the live community, not the PTR community, the live community, to adjust to these changes and give their feedback on them. Having an off season is important, and right now only having 1 to 2 days of an off season is not very impactful because these changes are just being hot fixed, they're being brought in, and those changes drastically affect the game. It's better for a competitive scene to have a more uniform experience, more predictable. You want to know what's going to happen before it happens. And in Overwatch, that's necessarily not the case. You can see in Overwatch League right now, those development changes are being done in stages so that it doesn't affect competitive play. Now, why should the Overwatch League players have an advantage over the traditional competitive player who might have aspirations of becoming an Overwatch League player one day? I don't know. It makes sense to do it at the highest level. It should make sense to do it at every level. So with that point being said, the schedule of the development should match the competitive seasons, being somewhere between 4 and 6 months. I don't know. I'm not a game designer. I don't claim to be one. I'm just giving my opinions and what I think would be the best decision for them to increase the quality of matchmaking. So another thing I want to address is too many accounts, or Smurf accounts more specifically. A lot of people have more than one account, especially at the highest level of the game. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Those people are not unnamed most of the time, and they will troll some of your games, not all of them, but some of them will, and others are boosting accounts. And that, in my experience, that isn't healthy for a competitive game. Now, there will be exceptions all of the time for every competitive game that you play, but it seems to be rampant and abundant, especially in Overwatch. So why do I think there are a lot of Smurf accounts? The main reason for me is that they're just way too less. There's not enough incentives for people to be playing on their main accounts. What I mean by that is the competitive points system. Now, I know that Blizzard has said that they're going to release more stuff we can purchase with our competitive points. But in all honesty, after like season 3, this should have been implemented. It should have been, all right, guys, we know that for how many competitive points we're giving out for high tier players or even mid tier players, low tier players. If you play a lot, you're going to have a bunch of these points stacking up, and there's only so much you can spend your points on, and that's right now the extent of that is just gold weapons. So having that change being implemented sooner for the better is good, so that players can get back on their main accounts. They can start grinding games. They can start getting even better at the game, and they can earn rewards for it. A big part of the gaming industry right now is people want to be rewarded. And the only other system for rewards is by getting top 500 and maintaining it, which is literally less than the 1% of the 1%. It's 500 out of an average of 100,000 players. So most people, that's out of the question. But the casual players still want something to spend their competitive points on for spending time trying to get better at the game. Putting in those extra systems to buy things with their competitive points will only help the game out. So I also wanted to mention some of the design choices for the character balancing lately. To me, it seems like, and I'm a PC player, and I do not know what it is like on console, but the only thing I really know is that they had to nerf Torbjorn in the first week of console because it was overpowered. But I can see why. So character balance and design seems to be taking a shift towards the console players, and what I mean by that is that the latest heroes that are coming out are based mainly off of how well you can use your abilities and when you're going to use your abilities. And I'll talk about this in just a second when I mention the trifecta. But what I mean by this is these abilities, if you use them correctly, create an environment where low skill characters can have high impacts on the game. One of the biggest culprits of this was the Mercy Apocalypse, where the last few seasons have been plagued by Mercy mains and people only playing Mercy to grind SR. I wouldn't consider that healthy for a competitive game, but I don't want to diss the people who do like and enjoy playing one character, because I'll mention that right now. What I consider to be helpful in a competitive environment is this trifecta, especially for Overwatch, and more specifically for Overwatch, the trifecta of skill, knowledge, and teamwork in that order. So people who are the most skilled should be able to determine their rank based off their skill low. The next comes knowledge, and knowledge is equally as important as skill, but it seems like you can have more impact on the game if you're a higher skilled player. So knowledge is number 2. Number 3 is teamwork, and I know Overwatch is all about teamwork, playing it for 9 competitive seasons now. Teamwork is a big aspect of the game, but not everyone is down with the teamwork business, so you can't rely on them all the time. So 3 people that I want to mention, and you guys can have your own, you can post in the comments below who you think the 3 best for these categories are. For skill, I'm going to mention Calvin, or I could even say Taimu in his prime. These people have the highest tier mechanical aim, and they understand what they're doing at all times, and they know how to aim. They know how to use all of their abilities correctly, and they know what they're doing. And what I mean by this is that all of these people I'm going to mention have all 3 categories maxed out. They know exactly what they're doing. They're great Overwatch players, people that I love to play with on my team all the time. The next one for the knowledge category is Fitzy here, also known as the best Sombra in the game. And coming from StarCraft, Fitzy was very mechanically skilled at a game like StarCraft, but after playing with him on a team for several months, you can kind of tell that Fitzy might not have the best mechanical skill, and more specifically in aiming. He's not going to be your best McCree player. He's not going to be your best Widow player. But put him on a hero that requires a good amount of thinking, a good amount of knowledge, and he'll succeed. And he's always mentioned that coming from StarCraft was a big help for him in learning what's important to a game in regards to being knowledgeable on it. Fitzy, being one of the best Sombras, knows exactly where all the health packs are on all of the maps. He knows when to hack them. He knows where to be. He knows what to do. He knows how to improvise. So being on one of the greatest pillars of knowledge has led Fitzy to the top 10 most recently, and he's overall a good player and a good guy. The next category I want to talk about is teamwork, and this is more specifically the Lucios on your team that talk. And now it doesn't have to always be Lucio. Back when I played the game, a majority of the time it was Lucio, and these guys are people who are really good at just Overwatch, and they like to win. And it doesn't matter who's playing on their team or what's going on. They'll play Lucio. They'll play what needs to be played. They'll be in team chat, they'll be making calls, they'll be shot calling the game if they have to. And these guys, they just want to win. They want to grind. One of the people that I want to mention playing with, who's really good at teamwork and also just a good overall skilled player. One of the players in the Overwatch League is Emong, and playing with this guy, if you have him on your team, he's going to be helping your team win, no matter what's going on. No matter if you have trolls or smurfs or anything, he wants to win. That's why he's there to play the game. So some of the things I just mentioned, these more go into the aspect of the actual game design. Right now, there's low-skilled, high-impact heroes, especially on PC. Now, in regards to console, some of the development choices can be different, but that's not for me to decide. I'm a PC player. I kind of thought Overwatch was going to be more of a PC game, but from what I've seen, it's more shifting to like a console-esque development route. And I might be surprised later. I don't know what their plans for development is. But from what I can see right now, in Season 9, is that the trifecta of skill and knowledge is being taken over by teamwork. And that triangle, if you will, is very weighted towards teamwork. And the best thing you could do to play in a teamwork-based game is to have a low-skill, high-impact hero. Like D.Va, like Mercy, like Orisa, like Torbjorn. And those guys seem more like console heroes to me than someone like Widowmaker or McCree or Soldier 76 and etc. etc. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the actual system of matchmaking, or how the game pits players against each other, and some of the flaws I think that it's had and still has, and some of the things I would personally try to fix, or I would be satisfied if it was fixed in the future. And the first being at the highest tier, and this isn't for everyone, but overall the mix between the West Coast and the East Coast players, especially with Overwatch League right now, the highest concentration of skilled players are on West Coast. Me being an East Coast player means that most of my games I'm not going to be playing with, the highest of the high tier players. I'm just going to be playing with the Grandmaster and the Master players on the East Coast most of the time. Now, if you start making your way up all the way to like top 200, you're going to start playing with just West Coast people because that's where they're more centralized. But the problem I have with this mix is that if there's just one person on West Coast, just one, and I've noticed this from scrims, from practice, from everything, you just have one person on your team that is from the West, you will be playing on a West Coast server. So West Coast servers take priority over the East no matter what. And I think by balancing this based on player count, let's say in a match of 6 versus 6, you have 10 players on the East and the rest are on the West, that you would prioritize that server to be on the East server. And not just because there's 2 players left over that's going to determine that it'll be a West server. That has a negative impact for all of the people on the East. And it's kind of just unfair to those players as well. So the next thing I wanted to say is that there's just too much difference between SR gap in your games. Now, this is coming from a 1%er, the top 1%. There's a much greater chance that there will be too much difference in SR to make the game enjoyable at the highest level. Now, what I wanted to say to this is that GM you can only queue, and Grandmaster you can only queue with groups or teammates that are within 250 SR. And in Masters it's 500, and everyone else it's 1,000 SR. I believe so, it's 1,000 SR, at least in Diamond. So with that being said, one of the things I would try to change is take the entire game's average and pit them within 500 SR. So if you have, half of your players are 4,000 SR and half of your players are 4,200 SR, or let's just say 4,500 SR, that match average is going to be 4,200 SR. Everyone in that game should be within 500 SR of that 4,200 mark, no matter what. Having the highest, rank 1 4,600 playing with diamonds just because it's a bad time of the day, to me is unacceptable. And these high tier players, and even players in general, they would prefer to wait longer to have a more enjoyable matchmaking experience. Now, this fix to me doesn't seem, it doesn't seem impossible. It seems very possible with the consistent player base that Overwatch gets. And by stacking that with the mix of East and West Coast players, it increases the pool that that you'll be able to queue with each other together or be match made together. So, how I would prioritize matchmaking, I wanted to add one more thing, and this would be the most important thing to combat Smurf accounts, like I mentioned earlier, is that the number one priority to me should be based on your profile level. A lot of people have been playing the game since its release, and especially the very good players have been playing the game since its release. And having level 25 accounts hop right into matchmaking, do their 10 games, and they're already, Grandmaster top 500. It allows them the ability to troll, to not be a part of the trifecta of the skill, knowledge, and teamwork. And you're not going to have an enjoyable experience with someone who's never joining team chat, picking Widowmaker, Symmetra, Torbjorn, attack, whatever you want to say. And on priority level, based on your actual profile level, first would remove many of the Smurfs from your games right there. If you're level 600, everyone else on your team is going to be level 600, a silver border, or everyone on the other team is going to be, level 500, but then, however your team is. The next thing would be what I talked about, is with the SR within the average of 500. To me, it's unacceptable that that someone who's 4600 can play with someone who's diamond and have a difference of 1200 or so SR, even more. These really good people are going to have to literally carry some of the bad people on your team if the average on the other team is a little bit higher than the worst player on your team. And it seems like in Overwatch, you're only as good as your weakest link. So everyone on the team should be around average, and that only supports the notion of the skill, knowledge, and teamwork further on those pillars. The third thing I wanted to talk about was the server priority, the priority on the server between East and West. So I already explained all of that. That should be third priority, what server you're going to get into. And then the fourth big priority is the groups or stacks. I don't really know how Blizzard's matchmaking system, no one really knows how it works 100%, but I feel like if they could add a degree of priority within your profile level and not just your SR, and then base it on your SR, and then base it on what server you're playing on, and then base it on your groups. They already have all of these elements that they incorporate now. They just need to refine them better, and it would make a more enjoyable experience. Overall, my goal is to make the ladder directly determine your skill. When I was watching the preview for the Overwatch League video, I was so hyped that they would do like a combine. You'd be able to see all the best players on the ladder, go head to head in scrims, and people would be watching, and that never came to fruition, because in all honesty, the ladder had no representation or determination of your skill in the game of Overwatch competitively. So this led for really good people being stuck in elos that they don't deserve necessarily, even though I think that there's no such thing as elo hell in Overwatch. If you play the game and you're good, you'll be able to get to where you are supposed to be. But not all of your games are going to be good all of the time. And in fact, most of the time, my games aren't good at all, and it's just a detriment of luck. Roll the slot machine, see which teammates you get, especially at the high queues. But I don't see any problem with lower tier, middle tier, even upper middle tier players getting to where they deserve to be, because most of these issues happen within the top 5-6% anyway. That being said, making changes based on the highest percent only benefits players at the lower percentage. It only increases their chances of getting into better match-made games, and it increases their chances of winning those games if they're good enough to do so. So those are some of the big things that I wanted to touch on. I hope you guys enjoyed the gameplay video in the background. if you agree with some of the stuff, you know, make sure to send a comment, or if you disagree, make sure to send a comment. I'll try to reply. I don't plan on this being a huge video, just for people who are interested in listening to what I have to say about competitive Overwatch. But go ahead and drop a like. I'd appreciate it. This is one of my first videos I'm going to do, and I really just wanted to talk about what I think is some of the detriments to, you know, poor matchmaking in Overwatch, and what can be done to fix those. Thanks for listening, guys.